Hello. For this video, we're going to be talking about variable length records. Now, one of the nice things about variable length records is that they're delimited. Well, what's a delimiter? A delimiter is just a character that is put in between each and every item in the record so that you know how to handle those records. So you don't have to worry like we did in the last challenge of, the first name being 16 characters always and the last name being 16 characters always, but then the birthday being 8 characters, because that just doesn't work. It's very difficult. It's very time consuming to program. That's why most people use delimited records. So in this challenge, the delimiter is the pipe. So that would be, shift backspace. And so every time we hit a pipe, we know that one piece of data has come in. We know that we've gotten the first name, the last name, or the birthday. Now, something they neglected to tell us in this particular challenge is that there are actually 2 delimiters. For each individual record, there's a pipe delimiter. But in between a record, in the file, every record is delimited by a new line character. So we have to take that into account when we're reading the data in. So that's something to remember. Now, what do we have? Well, we're giving this is our file with the data in it. This is our first name. Oops, sorry about that. This is our last name. And this is the date of birth that we're going to be changing. Now, they want us to put all of our code in functions, and that's completely fine. So we're going to put data in a function that's load to data from file, and then we're going to find the index. That's the index of the row that we want to replace. And then we're going to set the birthday, so we're going to replace the birthday in the row that we found. And then we're going to make text from our 2D array, and then we're going to write it out to the file. So let's start by reading it in, okay? There's a little bit different syntax here than what we're used to with reading something in, and that's because we're going to read it line by line, or we're going to read it knowing that it is line by line, and there's multiple lines in the file. So this syntax is going to be with open file for reading. And so this just says that I'm opening a file for reading. You're going to give me back to the file, and I'm going to use that file pointer with a variable called FP. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read in all the lines. So I get one big conglomeration of data. Well, now what do I have to do? Well, I have to break it up into my 2D array, because records, this is going to be my 2D array. So because content knows that things are split by new lines, I'm going to say for row in content, and then I'm going to have a record list, and the record list is split by new line and split by pipe. So this will say I'm going to split everything up into the constituent things, and I'm going to append my records to a record list. So what we can look here is, I'm going to print record list for a second, and we'll see what it shows. Okay, so record list is all of this stuff. Okay, and if I'm done and I print records, oh, wait a minute, that's wrong. So, I'm overdoing it here, and I just realized that, so let's fix it. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do, I don't need that extra for loop. What I do need to do is I just need to say records. And then we don't need to do that. So let's try it now. Found a bug in my code. Okay. So it doesn't like something I did. Let's figure out what I did. Line 67, load 2D array variable. Line 23, row is not defined. That's my bad. Content. Oh, wait a minute. I was stripping the new line and splitting. So let's see what happens. And let's just get rid of that strip for a second. Let's print content first. Let's see what our content looks like. It's always good to know. Hold on. Get rid of that. Check it. Okay, so this is what our content looks like. So we basically already have a set of records, but we need a 2D array now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I'm going to say, so for each record, so content is actually a row. So I'm going to say for row in content, and then I'm going to say records is content. We're going to strip any new lines. And I'm going to print records. And then I'm going to say, oh, that's my bad. This is going to be row. This is going to be rec list. So I have to get my variables right. And then I'm going to say row records, append rec list. And then before I return, I'm going to print records. Okay, so let's see what this does. Okay, so this looks pretty good. So Adam, Theodore, Adam, Monty, Adam, Ruth. And then I print records again. So if I get rid of rec list and I just print records, I should be good. What I want to do is I just want to make sure that my data is correct before I go off to the next thing. And my data is correct. I have a multi-dimensional array, two-dimensional array. The first, so each row represents a line that was in that file, and each column represents a piece of data. So first name, last name, birthday. So I'm just going to comment out this print statement because we don't need it. So that's the first thing that this is going to call. It's going to call load 2D array from file. Now remember, we always have to define our functions before we call them. So it gives me the file and I'm returning records. And so this is what I'm returning, which is what I need to return. Okay, so now we have to find what we're looking for. So the index we're hunting for is the row index that has the first name and the last name. And to do that, we're calling find index. So let's go up and find our find index. We have find index, passing in the records, passing in the first name and the last name, and we have to find it. So how do I find it? Well, this is a multi-dimensional array. We know how to go through a multi-dimensional array. We've done it multiple times. So because I need the index, I'm using the syntax for I in range. So that way I will always be the number of the row, and I say row is records of I, and then I do my check. If row of 0 is first name and row of I is last name, then I'm going to return the index of the row. So once I get the index of the row back, I'm going to set the birthday, because the purpose of this is we have to change the birthday. So we're going to call the setBirthday function. I'm going to pass in the records, I'm going to pass in the index, and I'm going to pass in the new birthday. So first of all, I want to make sure index isn't none. I want to make sure that they didn't sneak something in on me and to blow up my program. So I have to make sure that the index is valid. So what I'm just doing here is I'm saying if index is none, I'm throwing my hands up and returning because there's nothing I can do. Otherwise, I'm going to say record of index of 2, because we know the third element, or index 2, or the index value of 2, is always the birthday. So this is my row counter, this is my column counter. So I'm looking for, in this case, this is my row, and this is my column. And I'm just going to set the birthday. That's all I have to do. Then the next thing I have to do is I have to make text from the 2D array. Well, how do I do that? It's actually pretty easy because Python gives us functions to do this. So I'm going to create an array called joined, and I'm going to create a retval. It's just a variable called retval. It's something I use when I'm writing my code. That right now is going to be an empty string. So what do I want to do first? Well, what I want to do first is I want to take each of the rows and I want to join them with a delimiter. And the delimiter has to be the pipe. So I do this by saying joined.append, so I'm adding them to the joined array. And what am I adding? Well, I get this neat little function and this neat little syntax from Python. This says I want to delimit it by the pipe and I want to join my row. So each element in my row will be replaced. Instead of being a row, it'll come back as a string with a pipe in between each element, which is exactly the way I need it. And after we've done that for all the rows, then we're going to do the same thing but for joined. So joined now has one string per row, and now I'm going to take that joined, which has one string per row, and I'm going to turn that into a series of strings with new lines in between them. So let me do a few printing out things so we see what we're working with. So here I'm going to print joined. And we'll see this kind of progress. Sorry. Here, we'll just do this. So we'll know where that started and ended. This is just, these little things are just to make it easier to figure out what's going on in your code. And then I'm going to print retval. So let's just run this for a second and see what happens. So here we see the progression. So I have now, instead of all those different columns, I have one row that's a string with Adam Smith. And then the next time I go through the loop, I have two rows, one with Adam Smith, one with Theodore Anderson, on down until I get to all of them. And when I finally get to, so this is when I'm done with this part of the loop. Okay? So this is the final one for that part of the loop. So then I'm doing my final join here with a new line, and what I get is a string with a bunch of new lines, which is exactly what I need. And so I've made my text from 2D array into output. Now the only thing that I have to do is I have to output it to a file. So I'm going to go back to opening my file P. This time it's for writing. I'm going to write to the output, and as usual I'm going to close the file. So now let's check it, and it's done. So now you see how much easier it is to do delimited text files than it is to do non-delimited text files. It just makes things easier.